When a narcissist finally accepts, and I mean truly accepts, that you're never coming back, something fascinating and deeply pathological begins to unfold. Because the narcissist cannot simply sit with the reality of abandonment. They cannot tolerate the straightforward truth that someone saw them completely, endured their treatment, and ultimately chose to leave. That narrative is too destabilizing, too threatening to the fragile structure of their identity. So they do what they've always done when confronted with unbearable reality. They reconstruct it. This isn't conscious deception, at least not entirely. It's more fundamental than that. It's a psychological survival mechanism that operates at the level of the narcissist's core defense system. The moment they accept you're truly gone, their psyche immediately begins the work of revision, of rewriting history in a way that preserves their grandiosity and protects against the wound of being left. And what emerges is an alternative narrative that inverts the entire relationship. In this revised version, they were always in control. The relationship didn't end because you chose to leave. It ended because they chose to let you go. You didn't outgrow them. You simply weren't capable of meeting them at their level. You didn't finally develop the self-respect to walk away. You gave up just when things were getting challenging, proving you never had the depth they thought you did. Listen to how comprehensive this revision becomes. Every moment of abuse gets reframed as a test of your commitment. Every boundary you set becomes evidence of your rigidity. Every time you expressed hurt becomes proof of your excessive sensitivity. The countless times they dismissed your needs become examples of them refusing to enable your dysfunction. Their infidelity becomes your failure to meet their needs. Their rage becomes your provocation. Their abandonment of you emotionally becomes your inability to connect with them authentically. The narcissist constructs a counter-narrative so complete that it accounts for every moment of the relationship through an inverted lens. And here's what makes this so insidious. They begin to genuinely believe it. This isn't just a story they tell others. It's a story they tell themselves with increasing conviction, until the line between revision and memory becomes completely blurred. They'll say things like, "I knew it wasn't going to work, but I gave it a chance anyway," or "I stayed far longer than I should have because I wanted to help them, but you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved," or "I finally realized they were holding me back from my growth, so I had to make the difficult decision to release them." Notice the language. Notice how in every formulation, they're the agent. They're the one who knew, who chose, who decided, who released. You become passive in your own departure, a person who was let go rather than someone who actively chose to leave. This revision serves multiple crucial functions for the narcissist's psychological economy. First, it protects against shame. If they were abandoned because of their behavior, that would require acknowledging fault, confronting their impact on another person, sitting with the possibility that they're the problem. The revision eliminates this unbearable confrontation. Second, it preserves grandiosity. They can't be the person who was left behind. That position is incompatible with their inflated self-image. So they must be the one who did the leaving, even if that means completely rewriting objective reality. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it allows them to avoid grief. Real grief would require acknowledging that they lost something valuable through their own actions. It would require feeling the full weight of what their pathology has cost them. The revision transforms loss into choice, and therefore grief into something closer to relief or even satisfaction. But here's what the narcissist doesn't realize, or can't afford to realize. This revision costs them dearly. Because when you rewrite the story to make yourself the one who was always in control, you forfeit the possibility of learning from it. You eliminate any chance of seeing your part in what happened, of recognizing patterns, of developing the self-awareness that might lead to actual change. The narcissist becomes trapped in their own revisionist history, destined to repeat the same patterns because they've constructed a narrative where they never did anything wrong in the first place. How can you change what you won't acknowledge? How can you grow from an experience you've completely distorted? And there's something even more tragic here. On some level, in the parts of themselves they can't fully suppress, they know the truth. They know what actually happened. They know who really left and why. This creates a kind of internal split, a conscious narrative that protects them, and an unconscious knowing that torments them. This is why, even years later, the narcissist might suddenly erupt with rage when your name is mentioned, or become defensive about the relationship without prompting, or feel compelled to explain what really happened to anyone who'll listen. The revision is never quite complete because reality keeps threatening to break through. You can rewrite history to protect your ego, but you cannot rewrite it so thoroughly that you convince the part of yourself that lived through the actual events. But rewriting the past isn't quite enough to protect the narcissist's fragile equilibrium, because if they were really in control, if they really chose to let you go, then there's an obvious question. Why aren't they thriving now? Why does their life not reflect the liberation they claim to have chosen? So the narcissist moves to phase 2 of their defensive operation. They begin to perform transformation. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, the person who spent years resisting any suggestion that they needed to change becomes a public advocate for personal growth. They start therapy, and they make sure people know about it. They're reading self-help books, attending workshops, posting inspirational quotes about healing and self-awareness. They're talking about their journey, their awakening, their commitment to becoming a better person. And on the surface, this looks like exactly what you always hoped for. This looks like the change you pleaded for during countless conversations. The S looks like evidence that maybe they finally heard you, finally understood, finally decided to do the work. But here's what's actually happening. This transformation is theater. It's a performance designed for an audience of one, you, even though you're no longer there to witness it directly. The narcissist knows you're gone. They know you're not coming back. But they cannot tolerate the possibility that you left right before they became the person you always wanted them to be. They cannot bear the thought that you gave up on them prematurely, that you lacked the patience to wait for their evolution. So they create evidence, highly visible, carefully curated evidence, that you made a tragic mistake. This performance serves multiple purposes simultaneously. On one level, it's designed to reach you through the inevitable channels that remain between you, mutual friends, social media, the social network you once shared. The narcissist knows that someone will mention it to you. Someone will say, they're really working on themselves now. They seem different. Maybe you were too hasty. That's the message they're trying to plant in your consciousness. Regret, doubt, the nagging question of, what if I had just waited a little longer? But there's another layer to this performance that's even more psychologically complex. The narcissist is also trying to convince themselves that they're capable of change, that they're doing the work, that they're not the person you left. Because living with the reality of their own stagnation is unbearable. The performance of transformation allows them to feel like they're moving forward even when their core pathology remains completely untouched. So, they're in therapy, but they're performing for the therapist rather than being vulnerable with them. They're using the therapeutic space to craft better narratives about themselves, to find more sophisticated justifications for their behavior, to learn the language of psychology so they can weaponize it more effectively. The therapy isn't about breaking down their defenses, it's about fortifying them with more credible materials. They're reading books about narcissism, but they're reading them to understand how to appear less narcissistic, not to fundamentally change their relational patterns. They're learning what a healthy person would say, how a self-aware person would respond, what emotional intelligence looks like from the outside. It's mimicry, not metamorphosis. They might even start new relationships quickly. Look how healed they are, how ready for connection. But watch closely and you'll see the same patterns emerging with different actors. The love bombing, the gradual devaluation, the control masked as concern, the empathy that evaporates the moment their needs aren't being centered. The performance is most visible on social media, where the narcissist can carefully curate what you and others see. Posts about boundaries and self-love, shares of articles about emotional intelligence and healthy relationships, photos that showcase a new lifestyle, new activities, a reinvented self. Every post is a breadcrumb, a signal meant to travel back to you. See what you're missing, see who I'm becoming without you. But here's the tell. Truly transforming people don't announce their transformation constantly. They don't need to. The change is evident in how they show up, how they treat others, how they take accountability for past harm. They're focused on the internal work, not the external performance of that work. The narcissist's transformation is all performance precisely because there's no substance beneath it. It's a stage production without a script that matters, an elaborate costume with no character development underneath. They're hoping that if they perform healing convincingly enough, They won't have to actually do it. And perhaps most tragically, this performance prevents actual healing from ever occurring. Because real transformation requires honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to sit with unbearable shame about who you've been and how you've harmed others. It requires dismantling the very defenses the narcissist is working so hard to preserve. The narcissist cannot simultaneously protect their grandiosity and genuinely transform. They cannot maintain the narrative that they were always in control while also acknowledging how out of control they actually were. They cannot perform being healed while avoiding the painful work that actual healing demands. So they remain trapped in this performance, this elaborate show that convinces no one who knows them well, that reaches you only as information you're relieved to observe from a distance, and that ultimately serves only to keep them from facing themselves. Years might pass with the performance continuing. The narcissists might become quite sophisticated in their use of therapeutic language, quite skilled at appearing self-aware. But the core remains unchanged, because change was never the actual goal. The goal was to manage your perception, to create doubt about your decision to leave, to maintain the fantasy that they're evolving while their fundamental patterns remain untouched. Real transformation whispers and shows up differently. Performance shouts and changes nothing. Now, here's where the narcissist's psychology reveals something deeply paradoxical about how they manage the permanence of your absence. Because while they're busy revising history and performing transformation, they're simultaneously doing something that seems to contradict both of those strategies. They're elevating you to mythological status. The person they once devalued, discarded, or drove away through sustained mistreatment suddenly becomes enshrined in their personal mythology as the one, the greatest love they ever had, the deepest connection they ever experienced, the relationship that mattered most. You transition from being someone they claimed was never good enough to being someone no one else could ever compare to. And if you're observing this from a distance, which you likely are, it can be absolutely bewildering. During the relationship, you were subjected to constant criticism. You were told you were too sensitive, too demanding, too much, and somehow simultaneously not enough. Your needs were dismissed as excessive. Your feelings were invalidated as unreasonable. Your very reality was questioned and denied. But now you were everything. Now the relationship was sacred. Now what you had together was unprecedented, irreplaceable, cosmically significant. So what's happening here? Why does the narcissist suddenly romanticize the very relationship they destroyed through their own behavior? First, let's understand that this romanticization serves a crucial defensive function. If you were the one, the great love of their life, then the narcissist has a ready explanation for why no subsequent relationship feels right, why no one else can satisfy them, why they seem unable to connect with new partners at the same depth. It's not because they're fundamentally incapable of genuine intimacy. It's not because their pathology prevents them from sustaining healthy relationships. It's because they already had the perfect connection, and fate or circumstance or your inability to appreciate what you had together took it away from them. The problem isn't their relational capacity, it's that they already met their match and lost them. This narrative is far more tolerable than the truth, that they destroy every relationship that gets close enough to threaten their defenses, and they'll continue to do so until they address their underlying pathology. Second, this romanticization allows the narcissist to keep you psychologically present even in your physical absence. And this is crucial because remember, you weren't just supply, you were high-quality supply, who also served as their emotional regulator, their evidence of goodness, their witness to potential. Losing you created a void that cannot be filled. By elevating you to great lost love status, the narcissist gets to keep a version of you in their inner world. Not the real you, of course. The real you set boundaries and left. But an idealized, frozen-in-time version of you that exists in their imagination. This phantom version can continue to serve some of the functions you used to serve without requiring any of the reciprocity or accountability that real you eventually demanded. It's a form of what we might call psychological object permanence, keeping you as an internal presence even when you're externally absent. You become a kind of emotional touchstone they can return to, a standard against which everyone else is measured and found wanting. Third, and this is particularly insidious, the romanticization is a form of ongoing control, because by making you the one who got away, The narcissist is still writing a story about you. They're still defining what your relationship meant. They're still maintaining a connection, even if it's entirely one-sided and exists only in their narrative. They might tell new partners about you, always positioning themselves as the heartbroken protagonist who never quite recovered from losing you. They might keep photos, mementos, evidence of your relationship prominently displayed or carefully preserved. They might mark anniversaries, your birthday, the date you met, allowing themselves visible grief over your absence. All of this serves to keep you relevant in their emotional landscape. You're not someone they've moved on from. You're someone they're nobly, tragically unable to move on from. And this distinction matters to them because it preserves a thread of connection, however illusory. But here's what makes this romanticization particularly revealing. It exposes the narcissist's fundamental inability to hold complexity. During the relationship, you were all bad during devaluation phases, flawed, inadequate, the source of all problems. Now that you're permanently gone, you're all good, perfect, irreplaceable, the love of their life. What the narcissist cannot do is hold the integrated truth that you were a real person with strengths and limitations, that the relationship had genuine moments of connection alongside profound dysfunction, that they destroyed something valuable through their own choices and behavior. That would require acknowledging their role, feeling appropriate guilt and regret, and sitting with the complexity of loss that includes self-responsibility. It's far easier to idealize you in absence than it was to appreciate you in presence, because the idealized version of you in their memory doesn't require anything from them, doesn't set boundaries, doesn't ask them to change, doesn't reflect back uncomfortable truths. You become a perfect fantasy, forever frozen at the moment before you developed enough self-respect to leave. This is why you'll hear through mutual acquaintances that the narcissist still isn't over you years later. They talk about you with reverence, with longing, with a kind of performative grief that signals depth of feeling. They might even reach out periodically with messages about how they'll never find what they had with you, how you were the only one who truly understood them. But notice what's absent from this romanticization: accountability. Nowhere in the mythology do they take responsibility for why you left. Nowhere in the great love story do they acknowledge the abuse, the manipulation, the betrayal that made your departure necessary. The story is always tragic circumstance, bad timing, your inability to fight for the relationship, never their choices that made the relationship untenable. The romanticization is another form of revision, just dressed in different clothes. Instead of rewriting history to make themselves the one in control, they're rewriting it to make themselves the bereft lover who lost their great chance at happiness. Both versions protect them from the same unbearable truth, that they had something real and they destroyed it through patterns they refused to change. You weren't the one. You were the one who finally refused to participate in your own diminishment, and they can't forgive you for it. But the narcissist doesn't just romanticize you in private contemplation or perform transformation for distant observers. There's another strategy that unfolds when they realize you're truly gone and want to be manipulated back. And this one is particularly insidious because it operates through indirection, through channels that allow them to reach you without appearing to reach you. They begin what I call contamination through proxy. They work to occupy your mental and emotional space, through intermediaries, through strategic accidents, through carefully orchestrated circumstances that ensure you remain aware of them, even as you're trying to heal from them. Let me be clear about what this looks like in practice, because it's often subtle enough that you might question whether it's intentional, and that ambiguity is precisely the point. Suddenly, mutual friends are bringing up the narcissist in conversation with you. You know they've been asking about you, or they mention they're concerned about how you're doing, or they told me they hope you're well, and they wish you the best. These messages arrive dressed in apparent goodwill, but they're precisely calibrated Trojan horses designed to breach your boundaries. The narcissist can ouse you won't respond to them directly. You've blocked them. You've made your boundaries clear. You've closed the doors they used to walk through freely, so they use other people as delivery systems for their presence. And often, these intermediaries have no idea they're being used. They think they're being helpful, being a bridge, facilitating healing or closure. But here's what's actually happening. The narcissist is using these people to ensure they remain relevant in your psychological landscape. Each mention, each they asked about you, each piece of information that travels from them to you, it's all designed to interrupt your peace, to remind you they still exist, to maintain a thread of connection however tenuous. And it works, doesn't it? Even when you recognize it for what it is, even when you're intellectually aware of the manipulation, these proxy contacts still land. They still create a momentary disruption in your nervous system. They still pull your attention back to someone you're working hard to move beyond. The narcissist might also engineer accidental encounters. They start showing up in spaces they know you frequent. That coffee shop you mentioned loving, the gym you go to, the professional networking events in your industry. And when these encounters happen, there's always plausible deniability. Oh, I had no idea you'd be here. What a coincidence. But it's not coincidence, it's calculated. It's the narcissist creating opportunities to be in your physical space when they can no longer be in your emotional space with your consent. Each encounter serves to remind you they're still there, still thinking about you, still somehow orbiting your life. Then there's the strategic dissemination of information about themselves through channels they know will reach you. They make sure mutual friends hear about their suffering, how difficult the breakup has been, how much they miss you, how they're struggling. Or conversely, they ensure people hear about their success, the promotion, the new relationship, the amazing opportunities coming their way. Both types of information serve the same function. They're designed to occupy your mind. The suffering is meant to trigger your empathy, to make you question whether you were too harsh, to pull on the threads of guilt or concern. The success is meant to trigger comparison, doubt, perhaps even jealousy or regret. Either way, they're in your head. This is psychological warfare conducted through back channels. It's a way of maintaining presence without taking responsibility for that presence. If you confront them, if you reach out and say, "Stop using our friends to contact me," they can claim innocence. I wasn't contacting you. I was just talking to my friends. I can't control what they choose to share with you. The plausible deniability is built into the method. They get to remain in your awareness without being accountable for deliberately staying there. And here's why this strategy is particularly effective and particularly damaging. It prevents you from fully grieving and moving on. Grief requires absence. Healing requires space. But the narcissist, through these proxy contaminations, ensures that absence is never complete, that space is never fully achieved. You might go days or weeks without thinking about them, making real progress in your healing, and then a mutual friend mentions them, or you run into them accidentally, or you hear through the grapevine about some development in their life, and suddenly you're back in it, your nervous system activated, your thoughts pulled back to someone you're trying to release. This is intentional. The narcissist cannot have you directly, so they settle for having your attention indirectly. They cannot manipulate you back into the relationship, so they manipulate the environment around you to ensure they remain psychologically present. In some cases, this contamination becomes more aggressive. Flying monkeys, people the narcissist has recruited, often unknowingly to their cause, start questioning your narrative, defending the narcissist's character, suggesting you're being unfair or holding a grudge. These people become extensions of the narcissist's denial system, doing the work of making you doubt your own reality, your own experience, your own reasons for leaving. The narcissist might also engage in what's called reputation management, telling their version of the story to your shared community in ways that paint themselves sympathetically and you as unreasonable, cold, or damaged. They're not just protecting their image, they're creating an environment where your truth is preemptively discredited, where people question your perspective before you've even shared it. All of this, the concerned inquiries through friends, the strategic appearances, the managed flow of information, the reputation management, it's all in service of the same goal, preventing you from fully leaving their psychological orbit. Because if you can completely release them, completely move on, completely build a life where hair irrelevant, then they've truly lost. Not just your presence, but your attention, your emotional energy, your psychological real estate. And for the narcissist, your indifference is more intolerable than your anger. Your complete disengagement is more threatening than your ongoing hurt. So they work through these indirect channels to ensure that indifference and disengagement remain just out of reach. The narcissist who can't have you will settle for haunting you, because in your awareness, they remain powerful. While the narcissist is working to contaminate your peace from a distance, they're also engaged in another deeply revealing behavior, one that exposes both what they lost and their fundamental inability to move beyond it. They begin seeking replacement supply that bears an uncanny resemblance to you. And this isn't coincidental. This is the narcissist attempting to recreate what they destroyed, to find someone who can fill the void you left, to prove to themselves, and perhaps to you if you're still watching, that you were replaceable after all. So they start pursuing people with your qualities. If you were deeply empathic, they seek empaths. If you were intellectually sophisticated, they pursue intelligence. If you had a particular creative sensibility, spiritual orientation, or professional background, suddenly that's exactly what the narcissist finds attractive in others. They might even seek people who physically resemble you, who share your mannerisms, who occupy similar social spaces. On the surface, this makes psychological sense. They're drawn to what was familiar, what worked for them, what provided the specific kind of supply they became dependent on. It's the addictive pattern seeking its preferred substance. But here's where it becomes tragic and ultimately destructive. These relationships are doomed before they even begin. Because the narcissist isn't actually seeking a new person, they're seeking a substitute for you. And no one can successfully be someone else's substitute without eventually being punished for it. Watch what happens as these new relationships develop. Initially, there's intense idealization, the love bombing phase that you remember so well. The new person is amazing, perfect, exactly what the narcissist needs. They have your depth but without your issues, your perceptiveness but without your demands, your capacity for connection but without your limitations. The message being broadcast, often quite publicly, is, "See, I found someone better, someone who can give me what you couldn't." But then something shifts. As the relationship progresses and the new person begins to reveal themselves as an actual individual rather than a you substitute, the narcissist's resentment begins to surface. Because this person, despite having similar qualities, is not you. They don't respond exactly as you did. They don't understand the narcissist's unspoken cues the way you learn to. They don't provide the same quality of regulatory function because that level of attunement takes time to develop, and also because they're a different person with different patterns, and the narcissist, consciously or unconsciously, begins to punish them for this failure to be you. They criticize the ways this person differs from you. You don't understand me the way they did. Or they would have known what I needed, without me having to explain. Or even more overtly, you remind me of them, but you're not quite the same. The new partner is being held to a standard they can never meet because the standard is being someone else. This creates a particularly cruel dynamic. The new person was likely drawn to the relationship partly because they possess some of the same empathic, perceptive qualities you had. But those very qualities mean they begin to sense something's wrong. They feel they're being compared to someone they can never measure up to. They recognize they're cast in a role in someone else's drama rather than being met as themselves. And often, because they have empathic capacity similar to yours, they try harder. They attempt to understand what the narcissist needs, to bridge the gap, to be enough. They're repeating the same pattern you eventually broke free from, contorting themselves to meet an impossible standard, trying to fill a void that cannot be filled, competing with a ghost. But here's what makes this particularly revealing about the narcissist psychology. This pattern demonstrates that they learned nothing from losing you. They're not seeking a genuine new relationship with someone they can appreciate for who they actually are. They're trying to recapture what they had with you, which means they still don't understand that what they had with you was destroyed by their own behavior, not by fate or circumstance or your inadequacy. They're essentially trying to run the same program with different hardware, expecting a different result. But the program is the problem. Their relational pathology, their inability to reciprocate, their need to control and diminish. These patterns will emerge regardless of who the partner is. The new person might resemble you, but the narcissist is still fundamentally the same, which means the relationship will follow the same trajectory of idealization, devaluation, and eventual destruction. And there's often an element of vindictiveness in how the narcissist treats these you-resembling partners. On some level, they're angry at you for leaving, for seeing through them, for choosing yourself. But they can't punish you directly. You're gone, boundaried, unreachable. So they unconsciously punish or stand in for the crime of not being you, for reminding them of what they lost, for representing their failure to maintain the best supply source they ever had. These relationships become a form of repetition compulsion, the psychological phenomenon where we unconsciously recreate painful dynamics in an attempt to master them. The narcissist is trying to get it right this time, to prove they can maintain a relationship with someone of your caliber. But they're bringing the same unresolved pathology to the attempt, which means they're destined to fail in the same ways. Sometimes these relationships end quickly, when the new person recognizes early that they're being used as a replacement. Sometimes they last longer, with the new person enduring increasing resentment and comparison, gradually being devalued for failing to be someone they never agreed to be. But they never work. They can't work, because you cannot successfully replace someone while simultaneously resenting the replacement for not being the original. You cannot build a new relationship while haunted by an old one. And you certainly cannot healing in a new person when you've done no work to address what destroyed the previous relationship. The narcissist seeking your replacement reveals they haven't moved on. They've just changed the name of their obsession, while the pattern remains untouched. And finally, we arrive at perhaps the most persistent and psychologically revealing behavior of all, the one that can continue for years, even decades, after you've left. Because while the narcissist is rewriting history, performing transformation, romanticizing what you had, contaminating your peace through proxies, and cycling through replacement supply, they're also doing something quieter, more obsessive, more consuming. They're watching you, from whatever distance you've created, through whatever channels, remain available to them. The narcissist is monitoring your life, tracking your evolution, keeping score. And this surveillance becomes a kind of private torment they cannot resist, even though it consistently wounds them. If you maintain any social media presence, they're watching. Perhaps not from their main account, you've likely blocked that, but from backup accounts, from friends' profiles, through screenshots that mutual acquaintances share. They're scrolling through your photos, reading your posts, analyzing your captions for coded messages they believe are about them. If you have mutual friends, or exist in overlapping professional or social circles, they're asking questions that seem casual but are actually intelligence gathering. How is she doing? Did you see him at that event? I heard they started something new. How's that going? Each piece of information is collected, cataloged, integrated in the ongoing narrative they're constructing about your life without them. And what they're looking for, consciously or unconsciously, falls into two contradictory categories. And this contradiction reveals everything about their psychology. Part of them is hoping you'll fail, hoping you'll struggle without them, hoping you'll realize that leaving was a mistake and that your life has diminished in their absence. They're searching for evidence that supports their defensive narrative, that you needed them more than they needed you, that you gave up something precious, that they were the prize you foolishly discarded. Every sign of difficulty in your life, a job change that might indicate instability, a period without a visible relationship that might suggest loneliness, any hint of struggle, gets seized upon as validation. See, they're not doing as well as they pretend. They're probably regretting their decision. They probably think about me and wish things were different. This surveillance allows the narcissist to maintain the fantasy that you're secretly suffering, secretly diminished, secretly aware that you made a terrible mistake. It protects them from facing the more painful possibility that you're actually better off without them. But here's the other part, the part that coexists uneasily with the first. The narcissist is also tracking your success, your growth, your visible thriving. And this produces a different kind of torment, the excruciating awareness that you're moving forward, evolving, building a life that doesn't include them and doesn't seem to need them. They see you advancing in your career, pursuing creative projects, forming new relationships, traveling, learning, glowing with a kind of peace or vitality that you never quite had when you were managing their chaos. And each piece of evidence of your well-being is simultaneously something they cannot stop looking at, and something that wounds them to witness. Because your success contradicts every defensive narrative they've constructed. It proves that you didn't need them to thrive. In fact, you needed their absence. It demonstrates that the problem wasn't your inadequacy, but their presence. It validates your decision to leave in ways that are impossible to deny or reframe, and yet they cannot stop watching. This is the compulsive quality of it. Even though monitoring your life brings them pain, even though each post showing your happiness or growth creates cognitive dissonance with their narrative, even though they know this surveillance keeps them tethered to you psychologically when they claim to have moved on, they cannot stop. It's a form of what we might call masochistic fixation. The narcissist is drawn to the very evidence that destabilizes their defenses. They're compulsively seeking information that will hurt them because on some level, they cannot fully accept that you're gone, and they cannot stop you from moving forward without them. There's also a comparative element to this surveillance that's particularly toxic. The narcissist is constantly measuring their progress against yours. If you're succeeding, they need to be succeeding more. If you're in a new relationship, theirs needs to be better. If you've achieved something professionally, they need to demonstrate superior achievement. It becomes a private competition where they're keeping score, but we are not even playing. This is why you might hear, even years later, that the narcissist still mentions you, still brings you up in conversations, still seems to track what you're doing. It's not because they've maintained some healthy curiosity about an ex-partner's well-being. It's because they're stuck in a psychological pattern where your absence has become a presence they cannot escape, and your life has become a reference point against which they measure their own. The surveillance also serves another function. It keeps hope alive. Hope that you'll fail and prove they were right to devalue you. Hope that you'll succeed in ways that allow them to claim credit for your growth. I was the one who pushed them to pursue that. Hope that you'll reach out, that you'll miss them, that you'll indicate in some way that you still think about them. Every post you make, every milestone you achieve, every photo you share gets analyzed for subtext. Is this about me? Are they trying to make me jealous? Are they showing me what I lost? The narcissist projects meaning onto your public life, interpreting everything through the lens of their own importance in your story, unable to accept the more painful truth that you're living your life for yourself now, not in relation to them at all. And here's the tragedy of this surveillance. It ensures the narcissist never fully moves on, while you're actually building a new life. They're watching footage of your old one and their own failure within it. While you're present in your current experiences, they're stuck in a past they cannot release and a present that consistently reminds them of what they lost through their own actions. Years can pass. You can build an entirely new life. And still, the narcissist is watching from the shadows, keeping score, alternately hoping for your failure and being tormented by your success, unable to grant you the complete indifference that would finally free them both. When you cannot stop watching someone who's moved on without you, you prove every day that they made the right decision to leave.